Yes means yes and no means no. But what does just going along mean? According to feminist advocates calling the Mandi Gray rape verdict glorious, it means a man should go to prison because a woman participated in sex when she felt she didn't want to. That's the feminist theory of affirmative consent in action, and it's my subject on today's Fiamengo file. I'm Janice Fiamengo of the University of Ottawa. A while ago, neo-masculinist Roosh V earned himself a lot of hate when he published an article in early 2015 proposing that rape be made legal on private property. If consent was automatic once the bedroom threshold had been voluntarily crossed, he argued, women would be a lot more careful about the men they went home with. Well, the virtue signalers were after him for that. A February 2016 headline in the Toronto Sun blared, "Roosh V plans rape should be legal meetup in Toronto," even though the planned meetup for Roosh fans had nothing to do with that particular article from a year previous. 6 months earlier, when Roosh himself had visited Canada, a petition to deny Roosh V accommodation in Canada for the purposes of disseminating hate had garnered 46,940 irate signatures and saw the mayors of various Canadian cities quick to tweet their refusal to welcome him. I'm confident the vast majority of people who wanted to bar Roosh from Canada and even to prevent his followers from meeting hadn't even read the article in question, but they couldn't resist the opportunity to dramatically denounce a man who was supposedly in favor of rape. Roosh defended his article by saying the piece was a satirical thought experiment, not a serious proposal. Some commentators weren't sure that that had been his original intention, though I think it was. It does read like a thought experiment. It's a deliberately provocative overclaim intended to make a point. And the point is not really so shocking, and it certainly doesn't, in my opinion, qualify as hate. It's that if women want to be treated as adults who are responsible for their own behavior, perhaps they should think seriously about not getting blotto with men they hardly know, following them home from the bar, and then crying foul. Whatever one thinks about Roosh V, it's hard to deny that many women seem to do precisely that. And then if the men are not convicted of rape, the women rail against the patriarchal system for not believing women. Now in Canada, there's a case where a man has been convicted, and it seems that far from legalizing rape, we're actually at the point where we're making sex itself illegal. For the man, of course. In the Canadian case, which is to be appealed, York University graduate student Mustafa Ururyar was convicted of raping fellow graduate student Mandi Gray. The verdict has been widely celebrated in politically correct circles because it is a case in which a judge has seemingly gone out of his way to show that he is nothing like the trial judge in the Jian Ghomeshi case. Justice Zuker's verdict reads like a radical feminist textbook full of statements about rape being about power, about society's unrealistic expectations of how real victims behave, and about the necessity for couples to practice affirmative consent at all times. He even brings in battered woman syndrome, though how that is relevant is never made clear. He enthusiastically accepts Mandi Gray's version of events, despite the fact that she was not, as a Huffington Post writer phrases it, a perfect rape victim. What that means is that she explicitly invited a man for sex and then never told him she'd changed her mind about it. According to the court documents, Mandi Gray had been carrying on a fling with Mustafa Ururyar in the couple of weeks before the night of the alleged rape. On that evening, she was drinking with some friends, and she texted Mustafa asking him to join her and her friends at the bar and promising him that afterwards they would have, quote, hot sex. At trial, she claimed not to remember exactly what she had texted, having erased the texts from her phone. When Mustafa eventually took her up on her invitation, she proceeded to get drunk enough to feel she had to crash at his place, just to sleep there. Although she had the opportunity to go home with her friend Lacey, or to catch a cab to her own home, or to call somebody else to help her, she chose to stay with him. Very late into the night, and quite a few drinks later, she and Mustafa went into his bedroom, where she didn't resist, but claims she did not consent to oral sex and sexual intercourse. She stated at trial that her self-esteem was so low after Ururyar's vicious tirade on the way to his home that she just withdrew into herself and couldn't resist him. Now, obviously, someone who deletes texts and then is allegedly surprised when their compromising contents are revealed doesn't make the most confidence-inspiring advocate for her case. But even if everything she stated at trial is true, and even if everything she described is the typical behavior of a traumatized survivor — this is now the standard feminist excuse for anything that might create doubt about a victim story — well, even if Mandi is telling the truth, it's a strange kind of rape. Non-consensual only in the feminist sense of lacking an explicit yes at every stage of the proceedings. Mandi's own text to her friend on the morning after sums it up. Quote, "I don't know what it is," she wrote to her friend. Quote, "I didn't consent, but I didn't not consent." End quote. I agree with a commentator on Reddit. If you invite a man for sex, get drunk with him, go back to his house, and do not object when he begins having sex with you, it's hard for him to know he's assaulting you. Feminists seem to have no problem with men being put in jail for failing to secure an appropriate number of affirmatives, but I would hope that reasonable people would find that outrageous. To complicate matters further, the defendant said at trial that it didn't happen as Ms. Gray has claimed at all. In his version, Mandi's anger and hurt arose not from the fact that he purportedly raped her, but from the fact that he told her he didn't want to see her anymore. Rush V's thought experiment has never seemed more relevant. I would modify his proposal for real. Rape should never be legal, but it should be legally impossible to prosecute a man for rape when there is not only no evidence that an assault took place, but also plenty of evidence that the woman never said no. If it weren't for her eagerness to send a man to prison for her own bad choices, I would actually feel sorry for Mandi Gray, because I don't think she's a very happy girl. On the morning after her encounter with Mustafa, she texted to her friend, quote, "Why do I meet abusive psychos?" End quote. Note that she didn't say, "Why did I meet an abusive psycho?" It is stated in the present tense, and it is stated in the plural. In other words, it's a general statement about her life, her patterns, the men she habitually finds herself involved with, whom she allows to treat her not so well. And her friend's return text shows her recognition of the pattern Mandi is referring to. Surely it is significant that the friend's first words focus on Mandi's behavior and mindset. The friend doesn't say, "Oh my God, you've been raped. Go to the police right away." She says essentially, "You should stop doing this to yourself. It's not good for you." Here are her exact words. Quote, "I think you need to stay away from him, and remember, you deserve better, or you'll be walking down a dark path that doesn't change." End quote. And Mandi's response accepts the implied blame. Quote, "I know it's true. It just sucks, because that means not going out with a lot of people." End quote. In other words, Mandi's gone out with men like Mustafa before, and she thinks she likely will again, though she knows she probably shouldn't. But if the alternative is to be alone, that's hard. And yes, Dating a man who already has a girlfriend, as in the case of Mustafa, is often a recipe for feeling used. Going home with him when he's made it pretty clear he's not that interested and is actually annoyed by your behavior, well, that's probably going to make you feel even worse. Maybe you was a jerk, as some guys are, totally focused on getting laid as much as possible and not giving a damn about the full personhood of Mandi Gray. But there's no law against that, at least not yet. This is the whole problem with feminism as it is now affecting discussions about sexual violence, that it has nothing to do with equal rights and responsibilities. It makes a mockery of any notion of equality before the law, and it has everything to do with using the coercive power of the state to prosecute a man anytime a woman fails to feel good about herself, even when the man is a stand-in for a whole series of men this woman has chosen who happen to have made her feel cheap. Rush V nailed it in the article Everybody Loved to Hate. If you treat women like children, there's a strong likelihood they'll act like children. And the consequences for men and for the law sure aren't pretty.